The alert came through a little after 3 in the morning, when the hospital had settled into that strange, dead stretch where every sound feels too sharp. A monitor beeping down the hall. Rubber soles dragging over polished floor. Someone coughing behind a curtain. I was on nights then. Still am technically, though I keep telling myself it's temporary. I'm a nurse, and the night shift has a way of hollowing you out from the inside. You learn to function on vending machine coffee, stale adrenaline, and the thin hope that one of the day shift people will finally retire like they keep threatening to. So when my phone buzzed, I didn't panic. Not at first. It was the camera in my son's room, sending one of those motion and sound notifications. He was 3, old enough that he usually slept through until morning but still young enough to whimper himself awake from a dream, or kick the wall, or cough so hard the app decided something important had happened. I remember feeling almost relieved to have an excuse to look at him. Nights are hard that way. You miss the small, ordinary pieces of your own life, while you're helping strangers through the worst parts of theirs. I opened the app. The screen took a second to load. Then there they were. My wife and my son, sitting together on his bed. For maybe half a breath, my mind accepted it. Of course it did. My wife must have gone in because he got scared. Maybe he cried. Maybe he asked for her. Maybe she climbed into bed with him until he calmed down. That happened sometimes. I was already about to close the feed. Then my thumb stopped. Something in my body knew before I did. A low tightening under the ribs. A pressure in the back of my throat. The kind of feeling that doesn't arrive as a thought, but as a warning. They were too still. Not peaceful. Not sleepy. Not the soft stillness of a mother soothing a child in the dark. This was arranged stillness. They sat side by side on the mattress, facing the camera mounted across the room. The night vision flattened them into gray shapes, turned their eyes into pale, empty spots. My son's small shoulders rose and fell. My wife's chest moved with slow breaths. But nothing else changed. No hand rubbing his back. No sleepy shift of weight. No blink at first. Just 2 faces lifted toward the lens, as though they had been waiting for me to look. I told myself the camera made everything worse. Night vision always does. It steals warmth from familiar people and gives it back as something wrong. But I kept staring. And the longer I watched, the less they felt like my family. I closed the app too quickly, like shutting it could cut whatever thread had just been tied between my phone and that room. Then I called my wife. The phone rang twice. Maybe 3 times. In those few seconds, I tried to rearrange what I'd seen into something normal. Bad angle. Poor lighting. A glitch in the stream. Sleepy faces looking weird through infrared. Then she answered. Hello. Her voice was thick and irritated, dragged up from the bottom of sleep. That sound went through me in a way I can't explain. Because on the camera, she had looked awake. Not just awake. Present. Focused. Hey, I said. My own voice sounded too careful. You okay over there? There was a rustle. Sheets, I think. Yeah. Why? Is Buddy okay? She yawned into the phone. Buddy is what we call our son. He came into our room a little while ago. Maybe 15 minutes. He seemed scared, so I told him he could sleep with me. I looked down at the dark hospital floor. At my shoes. At nothing. Because I had just seen them in his room. Not 10 minutes ago. Not earlier in the night. Just now. Wait, I said. You're both in our bed. Yes, her annoyance sharpened a little. I was asleep. What's going on? Everybody keeps waking me up tonight. I didn't answer right away. My hand had gone cold around the phone. Hold on, I said. I put her on speaker and reopened the camera app, hating myself for doing it, hating the loading circle, hating the tiny pause before the feed came back. There are some feelings you don't really have again after childhood. Not exactly. That sudden drop in your stomach when you remember, too late, that something was due. That you forgot. That the world has been moving toward a consequence you didn't know you were supposed to stop. That old school morning terror hit me so hard I nearly dropped the phone. They were still there. My wife. My son. On his bed. Looking up. Their faces hadn't changed. Their posture hadn't loosened. My son's little legs were under the blanket, his small body upright in a way he never sat when he was tired. My wife's head was angled just enough that her eyes caught the camera glow and held it. "Hello," my wife said through the speaker. I swallowed, but my throat felt packed with cotton. "You're in bed right now," I said. "Yes. We're trying to sleep." I'm looking at his camera. "So, you and Buddy are sitting on his bed." A small silence opened between us. Then she said lower, "No, we're not." "I know what you're saying," I whispered. I don't know why I whispered. "But I'm looking at you. Give me a second." I heard her shift, heard fabric pull, heard her breathing change as she reached for her own phone. I kept my eyes on the feed. Some stupid part of me wanted the shapes on the screen to vanish when she opened the app, like being observed from both ends would force reality to correct itself. It didn't. The sound she made when she saw it will stay with me longer than anything I saw on that screen. It wasn't a scream. It was worse. It was the sound of her body trying to pull in all the air in the room at once, and still not having enough. I'd heard something close to it only a few times before. Once during a jump scare in a movie. Once when we lost sight of our son for maybe 3 seconds and found him near the mailbox, too close to the road. This was that same sound. Only deeper. Broken open. Then chaos. Sheets tearing back. Her feet hitting the floor. A choked noise that might have been my son waking. Something thumped against something else. The call disconnected. For a second, I just stood there in the nurse's station with my phone in my hand, listening to a dial tone that wasn't there. Then I called back. Voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. Again. Again. Each time the ringing seemed longer. Meaner. I kept looking between the call screen and the camera feed, where those two things that wore my family's shape still sat without moving. 4 minutes passed. That's what the clock said later. 4 minutes. I have lived entire years that felt shorter. When my phone finally rang, I nearly dropped it answering. "What's happening?" I said. "Where are you?" She was crying so hard the words collapsed into each other. I told her to slow down. I said it too loudly. I heard myself sounding like a nurse trying to calm a panicked patient, and I hated that too, because this was my wife, my son, my house. Eventually, I understood enough. They were in the car. She had grabbed Buddy and run. No shoes for him. No bag. No locking the door behind her. She said she didn't even know if she shut the garage. She had seen the camera, lifted our sleeping boy out of our bed, and carried him downstairs so fast she barely remembered touching the steps. She was driving to her parents' house. "Don't worry about the garage," I told her, because my mouth needed something practical to say. "I'll close it after work." "You are not going inside," she said immediately. "No," I said. "I won't." And I meant it when I said it. I think I did. "What is that?" she asked. "Why are we there? Is it old footage?" "I don't know." I looked again. The two figures stared back through the grainy feed. "I'm going to keep watching," I said. "Maybe I can tell if it's looping or delayed or something." "Do the words with Buddy." "We have code words." "I know how that sounds." My wife and I started them as a joke years ago because we'd watched too many movies where someone comes back wrong, or something pretends to be someone you love, and everyone ignores the obvious until it's too late. We thought it was funny to have little phrases only we knew. We even made a tiny 3-line story that we could recite back and forth, each of us saying alternating parts. Later, when Buddy got old enough to repeat things, we taught him his piece too. He thought it was a game. He still does. That night over the phone, I heard my wife say the first line. Buddy answered with his part, sleepy and confused at first, then giggling the way he always did when we practiced. My chest hurt so badly I had to sit down. He was my son. My actual son. Then my wife gave me our part, the part only she would know, with the exact rhythm we'd always used when we were laughing on the couch. She was her. The relief should have been clean. It was. It only made the things on the camera worse. My wife reached her parents' house safely. Her father came outside. I could hear his voice in the background, angry and frightened in that way older men get when they don't know what to protect against. Her mother was crying. Someone asked if they should call a priest. Ending that call was almost impossible. I kept telling her we'd sort it out in daylight. that maybe it was some freak malfunction, some cached video, some impossible technical problem that had selected the worst possible image to trap on our feed. She didn't believe that. Before she hung up, she told me something that made the hospital seem colder around me. When she ran out, she had passed Buddy's room. The door was open. The camera has a tiny light on the back. It blinks when it's connected. It isn't bright, but in a dark room it gives off just enough to mark the edges of things. She said she didn't look in. Not fully. She was holding our son and running. But from the corner of her eye, for one instant, she thought there was a shape sitting on his bed. Adult-sized. Waiting in the dark. After that, the only reason I stayed at work was because I knew they were out of the house. Even then, I almost left. Every task that night felt obscene. Checking vitals. Charting meds. Answering call lights. People around me were having ordinary emergencies, human emergencies, the kind with protocols and names and paperwork. Meanwhile, in my son's bedroom, 2 copies of the people I loved most sat like idols in the grain of a camera feed. For 4 hours, I watched whenever I could. They stayed. No matter how many times I opened the app, they were there. My wife's shape. My son's shape. Breathing. Blinking. Watching the camera. I tried to make myself useful by studying them. That's what I do when I'm scared. I look for patterns. I look for data. I look for something I can understand well enough to control. Their breathing seemed normal, which somehow made it worse. If they had been perfectly frozen, maybe I could have believed in a corrupted file. A frozen frame. A bad upload. But their shoulders moved. Their chests expanded and sank. Sometimes my son's copy blinked twice close together. Sometimes my wife's copy went a long stretch without blinking at all. So I started counting. 1 Mississippi. 2 Mississippi. 3. Blink. Again. 7 seconds. 14. 3. 21. There was no rhythm. No repeated sequence. No loop. I told myself maybe the feed was live but hacked. Maybe someone had placed a video on the stream that adjusted somehow, responded somehow. The mind will build a staircase out of toothpicks if the alternative is falling. Then dawn began to press at the edges of the room. On the camera, Buddy's curtains never let in enough light to shut off night vision completely. But they let in a thin, weak brightness around the window, and I watched that brightness grow. Minute by minute. Real time. The gray of the room changed as the sun came up outside my house. That was when the last reasonable explanation started to die. By the time my shift ended, I had imagined every possible thing I could do and rejected most of them. Call the police. And say what? There are strangers in my house who look exactly like my wife and child, except my wife and child are somewhere else. Even if they came, then what? What if the things upstairs were dangerous in a way nobody was prepared for. What if I sent 2 officers into that room and they didn't come back? What if guns didn't matter? What if opening the door was the mistake? I told one coworker. His name doesn't matter, but he's the kind of guy who believes the world has cracks in it. Ghosts, hauntings, bad land, old things. Normally I smiled and let him talk. That morning, I needed someone whose first instinct wouldn't be to call me insane. I showed him the feed. He leaned in, watched for maybe 10 seconds and said, "That is deeply messed up." Not helpful, but honest. I told him everything. The call. The code words. My wife running out. The thing she thought she saw in the room. He listened without laughing, without interrupting, without trying to make it smaller. Then he said he wanted to go with me. I told him absolutely not. He said we didn't have to go inside. Just to the house. Just close the garage. Just see if anything looked wrong from the outside. That sounded almost reasonable. That's how bad decisions start, I think. They don't feel stupid at first. They feel like compromise. We drove to my neighborhood in morning light that looked too clean for what waited there. People had trash cans at the curb. A dog barked behind a fence. Somewhere, someone's sprinkler ticked in steady little arcs. Everything was normal in that insulting way the world has when your life has split open and nobody else can see the wound. My garage door was still up. We walked around the house first. I don't know what we expected to find. Footprints. Broken windows. Some sign that would make the horror physical, manageable. The curtains were all closed because nobody had been there to open them, and the house looked blank from every side. My house. My safe place. My son's chalk still on the driveway. My wife's planter by the front step. I went to close the garage. That should have been it. I should have pressed the button, watched the door come down and left. Instead, standing there in the open garage, I felt something pull at me. Not a voice. Not words. Just a need. The need to know. It rose up so quickly and so completely that for a moment it felt like my own decision. I thought of the camera upstairs. I thought of those 2 faces lifted toward the lens. I thought of my wife saying there had been a shape in the room. "I'm going in," I said. My coworker looked at me like he'd been waiting for me to say it and dreading it at the same time. Then we went inside. The kitchen smelled faintly of old coffee and the dinner we hadn't cleaned up properly the night before. That smell nearly broke me. It was so ordinary. Plates in the sink. A dish towel half fallen from the oven handle. One of Buddy's plastic cups on the counter. We moved through the kitchen toward the front hall, where the stairs waited. The house was quiet in a way I had never heard before. Not peaceful. Listening. Every small sound seemed to travel too far. My breathing. My coworker's jacket brushing the wall. The soft give of the floor under our weight. At the bottom of the stairs, we stopped. I checked the camera again. Still there. My wife not wife. My son not son. On the bed. Facing up. I don't know how fear is supposed to work in the body, but mine stopped feeling like fear and became something heavier. Like I had swallowed wet cement. Like my blood had thickened and my bones had turned cold. My coworker put one foot on the first step. Something in me snapped awake. Stop, I said. Too loud. He froze. No, I said. We're leaving. Now. I turned back toward the kitchen. Then the floor above us creaked. One board. One unmistakable sound. Buddy's room has a terrible floorboard near the middle. It gives a loud, complaining groan almost every time someone steps on it. My wife and I had talked about fixing it, but part of us wanted to leave it alone. We joked that when Buddy got older and tried sneaking around, that board would betray him. It betrayed something that morning. The sound came from his room. Directly above us. Move, I said. My coworker hesitated for less than a second, but it felt like betrayal. Move. 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 We ran. Not brave. Not controlled. We slammed through the kitchen and into the garage like the house had exhaled us. I don't even remember crossing the threshold. On the street in the daylight, I opened the camera app with shaking hands. The bed was still there. The room was still gray. But now only the child was sitting on the mattress. The thing wearing my son's face stared up at the camera alone. My wife's copy was gone. My coworker saw it over my shoulder and whispered something I won't repeat. I couldn't stop looking at the screen. That was stupid, I said. My voice sounded far away. We never tell my wife we went in. He didn't argue. I got into my car and used the opener to shut the garage door. The panels rattled down slowly, too slowly, until the house was sealed again. Before we drove away, I checked the camera one more time. She was back. The thing shaped like my wife sat beside the thing shaped like my son, both in the same places as before, both angled toward the lens, both blinking at different times. As if nothing had happened. As if one of them had not just stood somewhere upstairs in the house with us. That was 4 days ago. 4 days since my wife fled with our son. 4 days since I stood inside my own home and heard something step across his bedroom floor. 4 days of watching those two things sit on his bed. They have not left. They have not shifted position. They have not slept. Every time I open the app, they are there, lifted faces washed pale by night vision, breathing like people, blinking like people, waiting with the patience of things that do not need to explain themselves. We haven't gone back. I don't know what happens next. I don't know who you call when the people in your house are not people, and the people they look like are sitting beside you somewhere else, alive and terrified. I only know that the camera is still connected. And they are still watching it.